Welcome everybody, I am Technivorous, and today we're going to be comparing models printed in both Cura 4.11 to the same models printed in the all-new Cura 5 beta. I have several models to compare, and we'll go over the reasons for each one, but first I need you to reduce the Z offset on that subscribe button and give that notification bell a good first layer squish. That way you don't miss out on any of the great Cura 5 content I have planned. First things first, I need to comb through both versions and make the settings identical. At least the ones that I can. A few settings have changed in the new version, so I won't be able to match them in 4.11. Now, let's prepare the first model, a tolerance test. There are actually 3 models in this print and 2 different tests. These will allow us to see if there's any accuracy difference between the engines. First thing I notice once I slice is that the Cura 5 engine is faster. Like, way faster. So let's check out the preview for this print while we wait for the other old Cura to finish slicing. Okay. So we've got 125 layers. Everything looks good. The nice thing about this center test is that it has different tolerances built in. With each ring, the gap gets progressively larger. If we can turn more pieces on one than the other, it's a measurable difference in accuracy. So 4.11 has finally finished slicing, and will take almost an hour longer with the same settings as Cura 5. Already, there's signs that the engine may really be better. Let's see what we notice in the pathing. At first, as we begin to scroll around and look at the models, we don't really notice any major differences, but upon closer examination, we'll start to see a few things. When we close in really close on these slots in the back that are used for screwing these loose, you can pry them loose with a screwdriver, as you'll see later, you'll see that the corners of the 4.11 model are actual corners. They're sharp and they're pointed and they are right angles. If you look at the same corner on the 5.0 version, you can see that they are slightly rounded. Now, some other interesting differences as we move on to the male and female slot test, you'll notice this little gap here on the male side of the 4.11 slice. Now, there is a little bit of a yellow line going through there, and that is letting you know that that is putting down an inner wall instead of outer walls. If you look at the other version, it is all green, and that is telling you that it is all outer wall, which means it is doing a more accurate job of filling that with fewer extrusion lines using that variable width extrusion method. Alright, and here we have our 2 tolerance tests. You can see the 4.11 version is on the right in pink, the 5.0 version on the left. And if we take a look, we can see with the pink version that the 0.5 millimeter slot spins pretty freely, and the 0.4 spun as well. The 0.3 and the 0.25 also spun. The 0.25 I had to free up by hand, but it spun pretty easily. However, when we reach the 0.2 millimeter slot, it does not turn by hand. So I did get it loose, but I had to pry on it a little bit with that screwdriver you see back there, and that was how we got that one to turn. Now, I also tried prying on the 0.15 and the 0.1 millimeter slots, and they would not release no matter how hard I tried to pry on them. So with this one, we got a looseness down to 0.25. Now, let's look at the green one here. You can see that the 5 spun freely and the 4 and the 0.3 as well. The 0.25 spun pretty well. The 0.2 I did have to break loose, but I broke it loose by hand. So I didn't need the screwdriver for that one. Slightly more accurate. The other 2, however, were the same as the other model. I could not get them loose. So there's a very, very minimal difference in this 0.2 millimeter slot that caused this one to be easier to free up than the 4.11 model, but it's not much of a difference at all. The next test that I have for you to look at today is the mating test. Now, there are 2 parts to each of these, a male and female. Again, the pink was printed in 4.11. Let's see if we can get them to fit together. These parts should be exactly the same size. The pegs should fit in the holes. That is the general idea. Now, I can get one of them to snap in there just barely in the back corner. None of the other pegs fit the slots, so this will not go together. I feel like if we did a little bit of horizontal expansion on those holes, we could get this to fit pretty perfectly, but we're testing the accuracy right out of the gate, and this one just does not fit together as well as I would like it to. So as you can see, they are just slightly too wide to go into those holes. They're also slightly too long to fit, which you will see on this other model as well. However, these pieces do fit together pretty well. They don't snap all the way in, but they go together just well enough to get stuck together pretty much. You can see that for the most part, most of them has slotted into their correct positions. This one on the end here does not want to quite go into where it goes. You can see the corner of it tearing up a little bit there. So I did have to force that one. The rest of the slots went in pretty easily, and it was fairly straightforward, and I would say that this was very accurate compared to the other one, seeing as how a lot more of them went into their positions. However, like I said, it's still too long in this direction here to fit into the slot. The next test we're going to compare today is one people wanted to see. I did a video on printing small with Cura 5 last week and got a request for the small Benchy in Cura 4 to see the difference. I'll pull Benchy into both versions here and multiply the models real quick for scale purposes, and we'll get it all set up and ready to go. We're going to do one at 50 and one at 10% just to show you the size difference. You can see them in the frame there, and there we go. So now let's get some scale going. Multiply the models. There we go. It's multiplying. And then we will scale them down. Let's call it 15% and set them both to that size. And then we can set the other benchies to 50% so we can see it in frame and have a reference. Then we slice. They're tiny models, so it goes pretty quickly. Okay, great. So before we attempt to print this, let's check the preview. And oh no, half our model is missing. This is because the old Cura can't print lines thinner than a certain width. If we had gone to 10%, there would be nothing to see. So let's check on Cura 5, and as expected, it's a perfectly cute little Benchy. Another point to the new version. Sad to say we won't be printing the Cura 4 version as it wouldn't come out anyway, but if you want to see me go even smaller with Cura 5, check out this video. Okay, so here's where things get interesting. The Benchy did not work at that scale on Cura 4.11. I did bring in this Deadpool model that I had a request to print, and as you can see, it's coming out fine here at 10% and missing a few spots here at the same height. Now, the 5.0 is the one missing layers here. We are going to attempt to print these both, and I'll be back in just a second to show you whether or not they came out. But in this particular print, it's looking like Cura 4.11 has a slight advantage when it comes to printing those swords. All the other stuff, the Z-seams, the layers, everything seems very, very similar. So let's see what happens. But what's this? It looks like both versions have come out very, very similar. Now, as we look here and kind of rotate these models, you'll see that the blades did come all the way out on the Cura 5 version. And if you compare the thickness of the two, it is actually still slightly more accurate than Cura 4.11. However, if I had seen this slice and not been doing a particular test print, I probably wouldn't even have run this Deadpool, and I'd have never known that it would have come out. So I will give the point to Cura 4.11 on this one simply because it showed a better preview of the slice. However, the model quality is still better in 5.0. And for our last model today, we did a calibration cube. Now remember, these models are 20 by 20 by 20 millimeters. So the closer we get to those numbers, the more accurate the print. I'm expecting the Z to be the same on both because they're from the same machine, but the pathing and extrusion should be slightly different, so hopefully the 5.0 cube is a little more accurate. And we're going to check it out here. I get a weird angle when I measured off the table here. We are going to set it flat and get a little bit closer in. We don't want to go all the way down because there is a slight elephant's foot at the bottom there, and I don't want that to affect the measurement of the cube because that's due to the squish. So the 5.0x is 19.99. Let's check out the 4.11. Just doing the same thing, getting it as flat as I can, checking out the x-axis. We're looking at 20.02, which is slightly oversized. So the other one was smaller, and this one is a little bit bigger. Neither of them is dead on, but this one is a little bit closer in the x. Let's try the y-axis now. And doing the same thing with the y-axis here. We're looking at 20.05, so almost a tenth of a millimeter. That's a 20th of a millimeter too large. And we'll just check the Z real quick. The Z is pretty much accurate on both of them to 19.99. So there you have it. Now that we actually have a data set, let's take a look at it. We can see here that in 5.0 our differences are a little bit smaller, so let's do some maths and see what those exact gaps are. You can see here that on the X we're looking at a negative 0.01, the Y is a negative 0.03, and the Z is a negative 0.01. On 4.11 we have positive values. Neither of them are very great, but on the X and Y they are both a greater difference than on 5.0, and the Z, for some reason, which I was not expecting, is a major difference. It is a 1/10 of a millimeter off. That shouldn't have anything to do with the slicing. I'm not sure what happened there, but so far from these details we can say that 5.0 is more accurate. When we take into account the fact that we were able to release the 2 millimeter gap on, or the 0.2 millimeter, excuse me, gap on the 5.0 tolerance model and only the 0.25 gap on the 4.11 model, I think it's pretty easy to conclude that it is actually more accurate. Now you have to keep in mind this is a new Ender 3 machine and I have not tuned any of the settings, the flow, any of that. So this is just pure slicer differences, and I think these numbers are interesting to see. I hope this video was interesting to you and that you found this data helpful in your decision on whether or not to try the Cura 5.0 beta. I do have to give you a small caveat before you download it for yourself. Make sure you keep your old version. This is a beta, so there may still be some bugs that need to be worked out, and your extensions such as Octoprint and the other ones are not going to work just yet. They need to be rebuilt with this new engine, so I wouldn't expect it to take too long for those to start hitting the marketplace, but for now you're definitely going to want to hang on to your old version. The point of this video is to show you that this actually is a huge step up in slicing capabilities. The engine is amazing. It is way faster. It is more accurate. And so far, I haven't had a single complaint about it. I have had a couple people who told me they've had crashes on loading. And if that is the case, I implore you to file a bug report with Ultimaker, and you do that by opening up your Cura and typing and hitting report a bug. So if you can't get Cura 5 to open to do that because it's crashing, go ahead into your last version of Cura and then type it all out there. You'll be able to see when you put in a bug report, you get basically some options. It'll bring you to the website and it'll tell you, have you fill out a form. So definitely check that out if you're having any issues. That way they can get them fixed before the full release of this version. If you're printing things really small and FDM, this is definitely the way to go. I feel like if I get a smaller nozzle, I could almost match resin quality, almost, by reducing the layer height and using Cura 5. So very, very interesting stuff. I will have a full review on the Cura 5 beta in the coming days. Make sure you smash that subscribe button like I said, and give that notification bell a good first layer squish. That way you get notified when we post new videos. And that's going to be it, guys. Technivorous out.